And I think that impact has to be in a metaverse, but also in the real world as well. And sustainability is definitely at the heart of that. We've had to think differently about how we're going to communicate, our intentions, our brand values, how we're going to go through the creative process and what we're going to produce.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of New Forum. We are the Web3 podcast on a mission to bring together leaders, creators, and innovators in Web3. We are thrilled to announce our guest today, Darla-Jane Gilroy. Darla is a British academic and former fashion designer and author and educator. She has written books such as The Little Book of Christian Louboutin, The Little Book of Burberry, which will be published soon, and she's also publishing another book very soon that is called Fashion Bags and Accessories. She's also been one of the 4 Blitz kids featured in David Mallet's music video for David Bowie, and today she's the Associate Dean of Knowledge and Exchange at Central St. Martin's and a consultant and educator. We want to talk with Darla today about the future of fashion, regarding the emerging technologies and what that means for fashion enthusiasts and fashion students today. Hi, Darla.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey into the fashion space? I know you have a quite wider experience within the fashion industry, and I kind of want to hear about your milestones and changing points that impacted you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I think my journey is not a typical one. I never expected to go into fashion. I came from a very academic background. There was a lot of emphasis on going to university to do something academic, but I was always creative. And a big part of my relationship with my mother revolved around making. So a lot of the things I did when I was a child was I made things with her. I always intended to be a surgeon and go into medicine and to specialize in microsurgery. And I was once interviewed by a broadcaster who said, well, fashion designers mess about with people's outsides and surgeons mess about with their insides. So I guess there were some transferable skills there. But I found my way to St. Martin's and I decided to study fashion. And I always retained an interest in the anatomy of the body, how clothes fit, the natural points on the body where they would rest. And that led me into kind of footwear and accessories, which became a kind of second career for me. But I went to St. Martin's. It was a fantastic opportunity for me to be in a very creative environment, in an environment where people were bringing lots of different skills into the mix. So there were people that were really into music, and they were DJs and writers and stylists and fashion designers and fine artists. And it was just a huge kind of ideas pool of sharing ideas and experiences. And it really shaped me, I think, as a kind of creative person. And it gave me a real ambition to feel that anything was possible. And while I was at St. Martin's, I started, making shoes. I got very into kind of footwear making, actual physical making of shoes. And I started up a fashion line. And the rest, they say, is sort of history, that just took off for me. When I graduated, and it led me to have a career in fashion. I had my own label. I designed, collections. They were sold all around the world. I had my own stores. I traveled a lot, and it was great. I had a fantastic time. And then after a while, I think I missed not being at home. I missed my family. I was traveling a lot. I was always away a lot. My friends kind of forgot about me. So they'd never invite me to anything anymore because I was never in the country. And I decided that I would sell the company, which I did. And I came back to the UK, and I kind of thought of all the things I've done, what still speaks to me. And the thing that spoke to me was footwear. So I began a kind of second career in footwear, and that's led me into academia. That's a very kind of potted history of my career, but those are definitely some of my milestones.
I love it though. It's really passionate, and it kind of is the ultimate, I feel like, Central St. Martin's story. What every young designer strives for, I guess, when they started the school. And when we were there in London at the school, I feel like you really feel this collaborative and this
exciting energy in the students and around, and also in the lecturers. And I think that now that you're lecturing there, it's so great to see that, you know, you switch like things, but you found your way, and that you can give that to your students as well.
Yeah, I think when I was interviewed for my job at St. Martin's and they rang me to say that I'd been appointed, actually they said, the head of school said, welcome home. And it definitely felt like coming home. I mean, it's a particular environment. I feel very privileged to have been educated in this environment. And I also feel very privileged now to be able to contribute to this environment in a different way, not as a student, but as an academic. And it's kind of just got bigger and bolder and brighter, and there are just even more strands of activity here. I think we span a really interesting space, which is a space around fashion, science, and technology, and bringing those three things together to create really interesting ideas for the future. And I think one of the things I would say about my own education is, one of the things I think fashion teaches you is always to be predictive in the way that you work, and to think about the future and be able to spot trends in terms of what might happen and what might come and what might be.
So Darla, we would like to know, at CSM, there's a lot of, like we mentioned, a lot of focus on innovation and preparing students for the future and challenges of their professions, you know, with programs like the innovation program. And I'm wondering, what do you see, what kind of impact have emerging technologies right now on the students, and what are their reactions? Like, do they have already some favorite tools, or what was your impression when you saw like the first projects they did?
Oh, that's a big question. I think one of the things that students here are very adept at is they're very adept at using analog and digital technologies together in very interesting ways. I think the idea of digital fashion can be quite difficult to grasp, but I think really we're speaking to a generation of people who see their digital selves represented and see that as being part of their social identity. And I think new technologies and digital fashion have allowed for kind of three really important things in this community. Co-creation, which is absolutely at the heart of CSM. And that may not be true of all art schools or creative environments, but it's absolutely true here. Sense of community, of being connected to different and interesting communities, and a really shared sense of values. Our students as a community have very strong values and thinking around things like climate emergency and sustainability. And they want to see all of those things integrated into the creative process. Having said that, you know, we've got fine artists, we've got sculptors, we've got painters, we've got fashion designers, we've got regenerative designers, we've got graphic designers, product designers, all under one roof. And I think they're using new technologies to different degrees in different places. I think particularly in terms of fashion, there's a strong collaboration between fashion designers who are creating analog collections, who are pairing themselves with maybe fashion communication students that are in a completely digital realm, so that they can create kind of their own universes and their own collections. And I think also it's really important that in terms of sustainability, that is really at the heart of what the students want to achieve, that whether you're making things physically or digitally, sustainability is really important, and that we make the best of everything, not more of everything.
So yeah, that's actually a really interesting subject and topic, because with the pandemic and sustainability issues and many other troubles within the industry, we can feel that fashion is sort of experiencing this identity crisis, you can say. Also, there are a lot of questions for brands, I guess, around the ethos of fashion. So we kind of living actually in that moment where, in the historical moment where fashion is changing a lot. It feels like that. So I wonder, what expectations and hopes do you think the new generation of students have now from fashion for the future?
I think now more than ever, people see fashion as a means to deliver social change, that it's not just about aesthetic and creative impetus. I think designing is an iterative process, and it's quite a repetitive process. So if digital technologies offer us the possibility to create the impossible, make the impossible possible. And I think that designers now want to be really sure that when they're making something, it has a value. We've got the ability with technology to sort of make whatever we want at any time, in any material, you know, in any setting. It's the possibilities are completely endless. So I think that there's an economy of thought that creative designers have now, that if you can do whatever you want to do things that matter, and you want to do things that have some impact. And I think that impact has to be in a metaverse, but also in the real world as well. And sustainability is definitely at the heart of that, because fashion had reached a crisis point. I think we're in a crisis point, that we can't keep adding to the mountain of stuff in the world, because we're all going to be buried under a sort of big pile of clothes. So we've had to think differently about how we're going to communicate, you know, our intentions, our brand values, how we're going to go through the creative process, and what we're going to produce. I think also there's been a big desire amongst the kind of current generation to democratize the process of production, that it shouldn't be in the hands of certain kind of elite fashion editors or certain people. And I think it's also created the most unbelievable opportunities for collaboration with you know, quite big brands, you know, are collaborating with quite small designers and producing really viable and interesting collections. And certainly when I was listening, that would never have happened. So I think that's a really encouraging opportunity for the future.
Yes, absolutely. And always Central St. Martin's has been the place where such, you know, successful and well-known designers were emerged from. And so it's been really through the years that happened, right? You had designers like Alexander McQueen and Stella McCartney, John Galliano, they all came from Central St. Martin's. But I really wonder, what do you think are the new possibilities in terms of innovation? What are these new opportunities now that exist for designers? It can be really within Metaverse or blockchain, but any really innovation that you think will help to solve those issues that you were talking about just now?
I think there are opportunities around obviously new product categories, that previously there was a kind of time element, there was an expense, there was sort of materials issues, supply chain issues that would all impact on the kind of creative process. I think now, because of digital design and digital fashion, there are opportunities to create a lot newer product categories for quite small brands. And I think also quite small emerging brands can have impact straight away. They can become very visible, they can be amplified really quickly. I think there are some interesting things around how IP is going to be protected. And there may be things that can be embedded in the blockchain that will protect IP, because I think that's going to be a huge thing. And I think particularly where you're working collaboratively, it becomes very difficult to really identify who initiated what, who owns what, where the IP lies. So I think there's some interesting conversations, I think, to be had about that in the future. But I think for me, really, my strongest interest is around the kind of creative process and the sorts of opportunities that are there, particularly in things like footwear and accessories, which is the hugely important product categories for brands. They're generating enormous amounts of revenue, both in the real world and the virtual world. If you think about the relationship with you know, Artifact and Nike, that's been a sort of phenomenal success. So I think there are huge opportunities there for emerging designers to find a space really quickly, to have quite a well-developed product offer, and to create digital assets.
I really love what you said about IP protection, because I've seen so many, you know, on Instagram, like I follow all these like CSM students and designers, and sometimes you see bigger brands then taking their designs as inspiration, and I'm just like, wow, this is not like how it should be, because they put in so much work and their original thought. And then, you know, if we now can really track who had the original idea and have that on the blockchain, that'd be, I think, amazing. And you mentioned your love for shoe design, and I want to go a bit there. Nike recently, they just launching their Metaverse experience with shoes at the center. And I'm wondering, especially like for sneakers, do you think we are going to have like a big Metaverse for sneakers and accessory, or do you think it's more going to be the focus on digital clothes in general? I'm wondering what's your thought on this, because I know you love shoes.
Well, I love shoes in all their forms, and I love accessories in all their forms. That's been a really big part of my career, and as you know, I've just written a book about that. But I think that for the metaverse, the relationship with sneakers is a relationship made in heaven. I think there were so many kind of barriers to footwear production in the real world that have been overcome and have created these really exciting possibilities and digital assets. So I think the sneaker relationship to the metaverse is going to be huge, absolutely huge. I mean, it is already, but I think that, you know, if you look at the sorts of brands that are investing in digital assets and investing in collaborations and producing in the metaverse, there's a significant income revenue that's already being created. I think you've got people like Show Studio who have shaped the tastes and standards of the fashion industry for 2 decades, who are now, you know, setting new standards in terms of the metaverse, in terms of aesthetic and taste and collaborations and the work that, you know, Nick Knight has done with Icon One. So I think, yeah, I think for me, that's probably the most exciting area.
You yourself, do you see yourself more as like a collector or like a wearer, or because I feel like, you know, digital fashion is something very different than, you know, traditional fashion. We are used to having fashion week and, you know, feeling the clothes, and it's really all about texture. So I'm wondering, do you still feel like wearing it is a bit like it's not as common, or it's not as good for the user? Or I'm wondering what's your thoughts on this as well, if you would be like a fan of digital fashion or a user of digital fashion.
I think I'm both. I think there's a desire to dematerialize the world, and there's a desire born out of the pandemic to rematerialize the world. And both those things are quite strong. I think for a fashion student, if you think about a fashion student who maybe is studying at somewhere like St. Martin's, we're asking a lot of our students in terms of the skills that they've got to acquire. So they've got to learn all about sort of the actual making of a garment, and they've also got to learn the sort of digital packages that would allow them to realize those things. And I think we haven't yet found that sort of balance of where the toolboxes are going to lie. But for me, as a kind of creative person and as a consumer, I see myself as both. I want to collect shoes and accessories in all their forms. I want to wear them, and I want to have digital assets as well. But I think there are sort of inherent problems with footwear and accessories that were coming to a head, regardless of metaverse, pandemic, whatever technology, that were coming to a head. And we had a perfect storm where technology has aligned with skills loss. So we've lost our ability to make shoes globally, to create this particular environment. And that I find very interesting.
That's exciting. And I would wonder actually around your collaborations with luxury brands. I know that St. Martin's had previously, and there are a couple of collaborations that are ongoing. For example, you have this amazing project with the luxury group LVMH for education around climate and biodiversity, and to empower emerging talents, right? But I wonder if you already spoke to them about the new internet, the Web3. What do they think about this innovation? I guess it would be interesting to kind of hear your perspective on this, but also if you know what the other brands are, luxury brands are thinking. And
I mean, I can't speak for LVMH, but we, you know, I think it's well publicized that, you know, Gucci and Burberry and LVMH and Balenciaga have all got sizable teams in place dedicated to exploring and testing Web3 as a space. I think when you get interest from big luxury brands like that, you know that this is something that's going to be significant and that's going to be realized as a potential new digital market. What I would say is I think that we're still in a situation where nobody quite sees the future yet, and we're throwing mud at the wall, and some of it is definitely going to stick and some of it's going to slide down. And I think we're still in quite early uncharted territories in terms of what this is really going to mean for kind of big luxury brands. But I think it's no secret that many of them are already, committing sizable amounts of budget to this sort of space. And actually, I think from their point of view, it's a really good way of testing things out that's relatively inexpensive. And I think, again, that's going to provide a lot of opportunities for graduates and new young designers that are coming through. There'll be even more opportunities for them to engage with those sorts of sub-luxury brands, which is great. That's great news.
I think, yeah, I definitely see that as well. Like that's why they have to get on early. I think the brands that are in the space early and that are digital native are also like having such a huge head start, because they are now making the aesthetic and they are now creating kind of their own world. And for example, we had Tribute brand on, and they have their own kind of like how they do everything, and I feel like it's really impressive. I'm wondering, Darla, if you yourself ever tried making like a digital sneaker or a digital piece. I would love to know that.
No, I only admire other people's, but I went to a couple of years ago. I went to Tommy Hilfiger in Amsterdam, and I was just blown away, because if you sort of go in, the first thing you see in the entrance hall is this kind of hologram of a sneaker, and I thought, oh, this is going to be, an interesting visit, and it was, and I just think it was really good to see the kind of possibilities of what, a fashion collection, the kind of environment it could be sold in, the sorts of opportunities to kind of iterate and create things really quickly. Just to see all of that in kind of one space was really good, really enlightening. I mean, I would love to get very, very involved in a digital fashion production, but unfortunately my schedule just doesn't allow for it.
We will see. Maybe somebody, will come up with a project.
I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I've got a huge interest in gaming, and that really came about. My son introduced me to gaming when he was a little bit younger than he is now, and I mean, it was, I've got a huge interest in that. I would love to get into that sort of space.
A fashion game, yeah.
A fashion game, but also I think from an educational perspective, I think we have not even scratched the surface of the relationship between education and gaming, and parents around the world will be horrified to hear me say this, but I just think that, this is the world that the next generation of people who are going to come into St. Martin's have been immersed in. They've been immersed in gaming technology. And actually, as educators, I think there's some really interesting things that we can do in the sort of gaming space. I'm really quite interested in how we might use avatars in education. I'm not proposing, that students have an on-screen experience where they have avatars as tutors, but I think there are certain parts of the processes that we're teaching that we can capture and that we can deliver digitally in a really interesting way.
That sounds so interesting. And we also know that you're publishing a book, and I'm wondering what kind of else projects you have going on that you're looking forward to besides the book, and we'd love to hear more about the book as well.
The book, I think, came about because obviously I've had a career in footwear and accessories, and I am just really, really, really interested in the sort of history of accessories in relation to kind of feminism, and how the bag, what we would call a sort of a knit bag, a handbag now, was a symbol of women being able to be liberated and to go outside. So I wanted to write the book about accessories, but I also in that book explore digital manufacture. And I do think that in 10 years' time, if you go into a design studio and you look at designs for footwear and accessories, everything will be completely digital. There will be no real making anymore. It's happening already, but there will be absolutely no real making anymore, because it's unsustainable to keep using leather. It's unsustainable to do certain things. So yeah, that's what I would say about the book. Upcoming, again, I'm really interested in how we can use Web3 and new digital technologies to archive, because one of the things that I have discovered when I was researching footwear and accessories is that a lot of those skills have been completely lost. But I think imagine if we could in 100 years' time have a conversation with Alexander McQueen, an avatar of him, about his design process and about his first collection, and I think there's a fantastic opportunity here. So that's a project that I would love to pursue.
That's amazing. This makes me think of Virgil Abloh, who left this whole plan of how to make a brand on his website, and like kind of like his whole world in there and resources. And I think, like you said, like that would be amazing to really go in depth with the process. Maybe there's also an AI tool who can help with that, but we will see. But I think it's definitely going in that direction.
Well, if there's anybody out there that wants to collaborate with me, I'm completely up for it, because I just think it would be amazing. And particularly somewhere like St. Martin's, where we've got a very long history of developing talent and of co-creating with all students to produce the next generation of really globally influential designers. I just think if there's a way of capturing their story, their interests, their design process, their first collections, it would just be an amazing archive, and it could be something that could be really interactive and engaging.
I can totally see this happening in Metaverse. This sounds like a great use case for that particular technology that is emerging right now. I think it's great that Metaverse actually has this also aspect of visual, really representation. So I think for brands, that is amazing. And also, if we could connect it with education, as you mentioned, Darla, that would be, I think, super interesting. So I guess my last question is really it's a traditional question we usually ask around advice for, when we talk to investors, we ask advice for startups, but we would love to hear your advice really for the emerging students, because you were once a student at St. Martin's, and you are also a fashion designer in the past, at least. And would you give some advice for these emerging designers that are coming out of Central St. Martin's on how to approach these exciting times where innovation is thriving, I guess, and where there are lots of innovative solutions out there?
Well, what would I say? I mean, I think I would always say, first and foremost, be brave. And I think at St. Martin's, we're very used to producing people who are brave and who want to set agendas as opposed to follow them. And I think I would say, secondly, to thine own self be true. Think about your values as a creative person and collaborate with people who share those values, because that's one thing that will always cause a level of tension. And then I would say that, in a way, don't be afraid of what you don't know, because there'll always be somebody out there that will know what what you don't. So it's about finding the right partners to collaborate with, and actually taking care of the bit that you feel you can contribute most significantly to, and don't worry about the other bits. Find somebody else who can do the other bits that you can't, and that way you'll always have a kind of equitable, healthy partnership that will take you forward.
I love this, this emphasis on collaboration, and especially now with Web3, I think like you can talk to anyone all over the world and collab. So really take usage of that opportunity that we have and all these like tools that are coming out now. And I want to thank you so much, Darla. This was so insightful, and I think all of our community will appreciate so much.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, everyone who joined us today on this insightful episode with Darla. And we can't thank you enough, Darla, for joining us today. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure to follow us on Twitter. We are NEWFORUM_NCO, and we also have a Discord where we are all together with all the members of our community and share insightful knowledge on the Web3 space. And we can't wait to see you in another forum.